Happy Friday. So this background is totally cutting off my head, but we're just going to we're going to deal with it. We are going to deal with it. So you get set up here on Instagram. And so it is a rainy Friday here in North Carolina. I totally took advantage of this is my favorite weather to sleep in. It is typically not the most productive weather for me to do work, but I am going to push through today because thunderstorms are just very calming. It's literally the sound that I go to sleep listening to. And to wake up to a thunderstorm is just really counterproductive and counterintuitive for me. But I did it, and we're here. So today, what I want to kind of chit chat about is kind of, I get a lot of my inspiration for, okay, what do I talk about from these lives from just kind of the common themes that go on in a lot of my sessions for the week. And this week, there was kind of a mix of things. They tend to all come down to the overall arching topic of mental health and, transforming and taking care of your mental health, especially if, I have a lot of clients who just have dealt with significant traumas, experience major depressive disorder, anxiety disorders. I've worked, and then also with my specialty in addictions, I've worked a lot with people who use substances to cope and depend on those substances to help them regulate and do life, because life be life in. I heard that quote the other day and I'm like, yo, that's totally applying to my life. Life be life in all the freaking time. So I wanted to kind of hone in on one part of, I think, actually I was inspired by rereading. I started rereading Brene Brown's book, The Power of Vulnerability. And for me, that book and just all of her work, her TED Talk, which is, went live a few years ago now. It was very transformative for just my career, because it was that moment where I was like, yo, I have figured a lot of this information out. I talk a lot about shame, the influence of fear within our lives. And then to have someone, especially a researcher with like citations and studies, to actually bring it all together and have a reference point for me, I was like, hell yeah. I was like, finally. So, and not because it's, the point being is that I actually had a shared, almost like a textbook. Like it, when I went to school, a lot of textbooks in clinical social work or the DSM, psychopharmacology, very, very dense material. And when you're working and then you have your therapeutic models of what you need to learn about cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, all the different types of modalities and treatments. There's so many things that I feel like what it lacks is the ability to relate it to people. How do people who are not trained that way actually make sense of the information that they don't necessarily have a background in? So I'm going to do my best to talk about one of the main points, which is how do you align with transformation? What's really the secret? What is a secret? And there's a lot of details that go into how to change a behavior, but I feel like one of the bigger secrets here is the concept of values. If you listen to a lot of like motivational influence podcast things, they talk about like you gotta find your values. That's one thing in therapy that we do, and that aligns with that overarching, like, not every person who gets motivated needs to go to therapy, but like, what is therapy? What do? We look at people's values. So I wanted to talk about, okay, like how do you align with that value, and then just give my perspective on how did I align with my own values in my transformation, and how did I see that? Because maybe someone could, try to tap into their own with the way I did it. And why I brought up Brene Brown is because she said something in this, the first chapter of her book that actually challenged me. I was like, oh shit, did I not do this the right way? And no, what she'd said was, the thing about self-improvement and self-development a lot of times is we get into this how-to culture, how to be happier, how to value your life, how to be grateful, how to practice gratitude, right? There's a lot of good information in a lot of how to do this, and I'm going to bring you my how to's, but also want to help you realize that being in how to mode, being in progressive, I have to accomplish something, be productive, needs to be something that you have a limit for. Because at the end of the day, if you start producing more shame, more frustration, more exhaustion from your own efforts to improve yourself, then you're repeating the same cycle that is pulling you down in one area, and you're producing it and just putting it into a different area of your life. So in my brain, because I'm very prone to doing that, like I can be like, so if I'm not, excessively drinking or excessively eating, I'm excessively working. And that's where that addiction concept comes from, is that nothing ever feels good enough. Why don't we feel good enough in what it is that we're doing? And so that right there is the balance that I want people to realize, that we have to maintain a perspective and a attachment to, is that we don't always need to be on go, go, go. Part of taking care of yourself is knowing your limits, to not be in go, go, go mode all the time. But when you do have the room to do something, it's very important that you do it, because I'm going to give the visual of, not the visual, but the concept of mind, body, spirit, right? I think if anyone thinks about health and wellness, what do they think of? It takes the mind, the body, and the spirit all comes together. To me, when I first started looking at that, I was like, because my specialty is in the mind and the body. Well, actually, no, more in the mind part. I had to learn a lot about the body on my own between my profession and the spiritual part. I'm still actively working on, and that's a story for another time. But you need those three components to be able to do anything. It reminded me a lot of, stay with me here, the fire triangle. So if you've ever worked in a job where you've had to be like fire extinguisher literate and you had to go through a fire training, you learn about the fire triangle. I was going to try to bring up, maybe I can share my screen if I can figure out how to do this real quick without taking too much time. Did I do it? I did it. I did it. So the fire triangle, I pulled up this because I want people who, if you've never been trained on this, maybe you will, maybe you won't, I don't know. But there's always three components that make a fire. You have to have oxygen, you have to have a heat source, and you have to have a fuel source. And without one of those, a fire is not going to exist, right? So if they teach you that when you're putting out a fire, I think the acronym is PASS, but point, aim, squeeze, sweep, is that you sweep at the base. You want to try to take out and neutralize the fuel. So when I saw this, and then I started learning more in my profession about cognitive behavioral therapy and the emotions and the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. So I wasn't this planned and organized with it today. But I want y'all to see that in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is the primary evidence-based treatment of most mental health disorders, we have a triad as well. It's our emotions influences our thoughts, and our thoughts influence behavior. And they're pretty open in the cycle of what and how we're made up. So I started relating this to the fire triangle. I think I just pulled that away. Oh, no, I didn't. Here we go. And I started relating, I wish I could pull them side by side, but I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to. What I see as the oxygen is more of the spiritual base. That's more symbolic and metaphorical. It was like our spirituality is what gives us a breath of fresh air sometimes. The heat in this would be our our body or our behavior, something that we can heat up. The fuel I see is more of our emotion, because I define emotions as energy in motion. So they tend to create a lot of passion or combustion within ourselves. So we've got, how do I stop sharing the screen? Or I'm going to go back to the CBT. So if you look at it this way, now CBT does not take into account the spirituality. That's the triad of the mind, body, spirit, and the model of wellness. So we're going to graduate to that. But the behaviors being the outcome of that, what perpetuates the motion. So if you think about it like a car, right? Like a car is moved upon by a heat source. We cause combustion with the gas. It needs air filters. So if your air filter's clogged, your gas, all that system is going to, it's going to be a little wacky. So we have these very similar models, and I started to see just the correlations between how do all these three things work together. They're really good in some ways, but they can be very detrimental in the other ways. Like fire, for example. If fire makes literally everything go, it makes cars go, it cooks our food, it can do a lot of other great things that I can't think of right now. But on the other hand, it can ruin us. It burns us. It hurts us. It burns houses down. It destroys things for other people. So I started to take a look at how can it be so useful? How can it be so beneficial in some ways, but it also be very detrimental in other ways? And I was like, my brain is just, I like puzzles too much to leave this alone. So I was like, well, they all have significance. They all have meaning. Like we're given those three components of a fire have made this great thing. We've built societies by using this tool. So they exist for a reason, but it's really how they become used and the strategy behind it is what causes that. And the same thing with therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy is that you need all three components, but individually they're very significant and they all exist for a reason, but they don't make us go unless all three of them are working together. And so what my job comes to be is help people realize, okay, what's blocking those fuel sources? What's blocking that thought? And how can that be a little bit more intentional? Because a lot of the times there's a lot of skills that do need to be learned, but it really comes down to how can we be more intentional with aligning all of these three things together and get an outcome. And the way I do that is with values. So my how-to and how I aligned with transformation, and I still do it to this day, and this is just something for individual practice. This is not, I mean, you can tell other people about it, don't get me wrong, but like, it's probably going to make more sense to you when you realize intentionally the value of what it is that you are doing in your life. And everything has a reason for it happens. Life happens for you and not necessarily to you. So let me go back to my notes here, make sure I made the point that I wanted to cover real quick. I had to write this out today for y'all. Okay, yeah, so I made all those points. How do you apply it, right? So I'm just going to tell you a little story. My job as a therapist it's intricate. I spend a lot of time with other people. It restricts me from doing what I don't really believe in normal, but what normal people would do, having a social life, having a one-track business, having, it just felt like at one point in my life, it felt like there was a lot of limitations within my role of being a trained psychoanalytic behavioral therapist. And at the beginning of my journey, that directly affected my health because I just felt like what I was doing, if my clients were not getting better, it wasn't good enough. I was stuck in that. What Brene Brown was talking about is like that cycle of like how to, because it's like if we did something and then life set us back anymore, it's like we're not good enough. What we did was not good enough. And what is the secret to feeling like that is good enough, that we are good enough and what we do is good enough? So I started really taking a look at, okay, what am I doing? And when I started to realize that just because a person doesn't get better, first, I don't have any control over that. My influence is not, I don't give people advice. I don't tell people what to do with their lives because I don't live their life. I only have control over what I think, feel, and do. Well, sometimes not even feel, but what I do in my life. So I had to start finding the value in what I was doing for other people. So I started realizing, this is just how I've made sense of it, so you guys can figure out what this looks like in your lives. Every conversation that I had with people, I had to pay attention to how their changed state by the end of those 53 to 60 minutes, any change in their attitude, in their mental health, just in that session, was due to my influence. So maybe I didn't get to talk with my friends that much that week, or I don't talk with, like, if you ask my friend circle, I'm one of those people, you let me know when you need something, but my role, unfortunately, my purpose does align with helping other people. So it takes away from people. I felt like I was a bad friend. But the people who understand, and once I understood my value of like, I send out people into very different communities because my clientele is not the same neighborhood. I send people, I've got some clients out of state, I've got some clients mostly in state because my license requires me to be here, but I'm sending people back out into a different community that have been influenced by something that maybe they'll never experience in their community, and their value is now significantly different just because of the values of therapy. So once I extended my reach and I saw the value and the duplicity in how my impact multiplied by those people leaving the therapy office and coming back every week or coming back every 2 weeks, it didn't become centralized about what I wasn't doing or if they weren't getting better, is that the reach now extended, the value increased for more people, for one person just to come into therapy. Now, I understand that can come off very grandiose in a lot of ways, but that's the thing. Like, I was coming from a place of not feeling good enough. Being grandiose is the least of my worries, in an unhealthy way anyway, is the least of my worries, to try to get myself out of an oppressed mindset that I'm not significant. Guess what? I'm not going to be that person that is so grandiose to the point where they don't realize their impact on people. If I'm doing it with intention, it really does secure the boundary from it being too much, from it being a grandiose and a narcissistic trait, because my core values are trying to make sure that I know the significance of my role in that, in what energy and what vibe I'm putting out in the world. So I hope that came off with some significance to, I do this often within, even still to this day, given that I am, I'm back, I've been open with y'all in my other lives about how I'm going through a season of healing and grieving right now. And I had to use a lot of those skills again I had to see the value in everything that I did. So if I happen to, what's the one thing? Oh, I've been struggling with my focus a little bit this week, right? And so when I struggle with my focus, I cultivate this frustration with myself that I'm like, yo, I need to get this done. Why am I doing something completely else that is really, it's not the project at hand? If I stayed focused on the frustration, I would increase we talked about cognitive dissonance a couple weeks ago. I would increase the cognitive dissonance in my life that decreases my focus. If I'm focused on, okay, what's the value of me being frustrated? I now see that, you know what, I'm practicing that emotional regulation skill so that I can regain the discipline to harness my focus. Because if I didn't have that skill, I would be going to therapy to learn it. That's ultimately how I still continuously find value in the things that frustrate me. I use this a lot with my road rage. I grew up in New England, about an hour outside of Boston. So if you've ever been there, you may know that the drivers are called massholes. Excuse my language. Never claimed to be PG around here. I am frustrated by anyone who's inconsiderate to the other drivers around them, but then also can't get out of my way. Because I can be one of those people, like, since I have that northern urgency to just like go, go, go. It frustrates me when people are in my way. Let's just put it that way, right? So I use this a lot of like, okay, when I was driving, my office is about 35 minutes from my home at the time. And that commute was like, it was traffic ridden. If you live in North Carolina, Raleigh specifically, I mean, any traffic anywhere is bad, but like, what's the value of traffic other than to just piss you off? Well, for me, since I was practicing at that point, like trying to see the value in everything that was happening to me, it was where I actually learned the most about mindfulness. It was where I had my self-care time at the beginning of my journey. Was that 30-minute ride home was where I decompress. If I had to make a phone call because I had a challenging client that day, I made the phone call. If I needed to just, be out of my mind and listen to music and just relieve myself from it, I listened to music. If I needed to be in silence and just drive home in silence, I did that. But that was the value of that time. So anyone that was in my way was teaching me that patience and to slow down and to make sure that I use that time to benefit myself. So that's just, what I wanted to bring to your attention today, and what I want to challenge you guys, whether you watch this now or whether you watch it later on, leave a comment as like, what is something that you've done that you perceive more as an annoyance, that I mean, it pisses you off, or it's just like, I wish that wouldn't happen. What is the value that it does have and the significance that it had in your life, because it happened to you? At this point, if you're not looking at those things that happened to you, those conversations that really like hurt your feelings, and you're not finding the value, then you're really carrying a lot of extra weight. And there is a correlation into the term there, is since my specialty does come down to our relationship with food. And that is where we turn to food to get our fuel. Like when we are using too much of energy because we're feeling and we're not recognizing that we're feeling, then we try to find a way to compensate the feeling tired. And that's where we turn to food. Our food becomes that fuel. And then if we're not choosing the right foods, then that can literally weigh us down. But our emotional reactions are the things that keep us from seeing that value. So I challenge you to take a look at what those things, maybe just try one, right? Maybe it's just the next time that you get irritated too, is like, how can you, where's that value? How can you it's kind of like a little form of greed in a way. You're being intentionally greedy with the experience that is happening to you, that you want to get the most out of it. That if this was an orange or a lemon, you are going to make the most lemonade, and what's that term? You squeeze lemons. You squeeze the most juice out of that lemon. That is value. That is the key, the secret to how you really stay aligned with transformation, is because you found every experience, every shitty feeling of being depressed, of like, what's the value in this? Sometimes it's that you can recognize that you're still breathing. Sometimes it is, if you're super anxious, it is because you need to practice managing your anxiety. Anxiety is something that will continue on in life if you are not looking at how it is of value to you. It's your alarm system. It is telling you that, hey, something's off. You need to consider feeding yourself. You need to consider resting. You need to consider something. If you didn't have an alarm system on your house, someone's going to come in and steal your shit, right? Everything has a significance. Everything has value in this world. So finding yours is really the secret to how you stay aligned and get started, but also stay aligned with transformation. So sorry, Brene Brown, I love your influence. It's actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I took your influence and I had to honor that it holds so much power to not get stuck in that how-to productivity culture and just find what's enough. But I also found that there's a lot of people, and myself included, that we can't always start there. And so when I had to find a way to make sense for people of like, okay, if you're in that perpetual motion and your brain is just not letting you go from that culture of like how to feel better, let's find the application of the research. And this is where I find a lot of, I guess they are more of my opinions, is that as much research is necessary, facts tend to keep people complacent. They tend to confirm and trigger that confirmation bias of like, all right, I know this, like sleep is fundamental. I need sleep. So therefore sleep becomes the highest priority. They don't look at the other research that says too much sleep will also train your body and become hormonally imbalanced because it doesn't know how to regulate from actually using fuel sources and behaviors to sustain in your day. It also is not conducive for the society that we live in. So when we just stay with the facts, we just stay with the research, a lot of the times the application of the research is very skewed in what its intended use is actually for. So that is my best version, at least the first version of us talking about like what's not only just it's the value of values, but finding out what those values and your guiding principles are can make that even more. And maybe that's something I'll go into a little bit more next week. I know it will be something I go into in my course, but it is, being able to have a collection of what your core values are so you can see like, what, if this thing happens to me. So we've if you don't know, one of my biggest core values is perspective. So if I can, if something happens to me that's able to give me another perspective of what my initial perspective is, it holds value in my life. If you can't make it make sense to me, it doesn't hold value. So just an example of like when you can determine your core values and what values actually not only have they guided you to this point, but you also want particular core values, you want to be a certain way, then moving forward, you know how to stay aligned with those values and you get the most out of your life. And eventually long term, you will start to feel better. I would say short to long term. I've seen people, everyone's different because we've all gone through different things. So be patient with yourselves. Find the value in patience. It sucks sometimes to have to practice patience versus just getting what we want, but there is value in having that skill of patience. Patience is not just a virtue, it's a skill. You got to practice it. So I hope that was helpful for someone today. I have a couple people on Instagram come in, but leave a comment in about what you think about the content, whether you want me to expand on anything else, and also just what is that annoyance that you can actually find value in. What is it presenting to you that you can maybe see it as a challenge if it got the best of you. And so that way I know that you guys, it's actually helping people and we can get rolling. I just have one quick announcement before I go because I need to start putting this out. I am actually having a speaking engagement coming up in May 10th. Sorry, that was incorrect. May 19th and 20th. If you guys go to my website here, Below, you can see all the details about the event, but I was asked to speak as the mental health person on how do you market yourself as a creative entrepreneur and prioritize your mental health in the lifestyle that of entrepreneurship. And that's something that, I'm still actively figuring out, but also practicing a lot. And what these lives are about is because entrepreneurship can really transform your life when you learn how to operate your life and form a business. Your life becomes that business. So mental health has to be prioritized in there, or you're not going to be able to either scale your business or sustain in business throughout that period of time. So I am super excited. I'm going to be speaking to a lot of, more creative people. So the people that just have skills and talents that I have not, spent a whole lot of time on. I have my own creative outlets, and you can also check that out on the website. Is my blog, where I am putting all of these more verbal tangents in a little bit more consolidated form and writing about them. And I would love for you guys to check that out. Feedback's welcomed, or yeah, just take it and use it and go make the world a better place. So I will see y'all next Friday at 10 a.m. Check out the event details and let me know if you guys have anything that you want me to speak more on, because coming up with these topics, I can speak on just about anything, but having more of a directed focus of what you guys want to hear is also a plus as well. So y'all have a good weekend and happy Friday.